smart compliance. Today, our session is on hot pepper. Before we start the session, let me remind the participants today, if they were not present in the previous weeks, we had sessions on the introduction of climate smart agriculture and climate smart compliance. Then we had sessions on soil and water management, sessions on roots and tuber crops and vegetables. Today we talk about hot pepper. We have two presenters, Omaira Villa from the CARDI Belize unit. Omaira is the CARDI representative in Belize. And we have Paul Lucas from the Antigua unit. The first presenter will be Omaira, and before Omaira starts, let me just give you a little background on Omaira Villa.
Greg, sorry, the first presenter is Paul. Sorry, we have a structure. The first presenter will be
Paul. Okay, all right.
Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. According to me, Paul works at the CARDI station, research station, and is also the head of the CARDI unit in CARDI Antigua. CARDI Antigua has been involved in production of hot pepper seed for the region over the past 20, 25 years. It has a very good track record. It has a seed lab and has good facilities for almost being able to certify hot pepper seed for distribution to the region and in some instances internationally. Before we start Paul's presentation, let me give you a little background on Paul Lucas. Paul Lucas is currently the CARDI representative for Antigua and Barbuda and Montserrat. He has been so since his placement in CARDI in 2017. His academic background includes a Bachelor of Science in Environmental and Natural Resource Management, as well as a Master of Science in Natural and Environmental Management, specializing in water resource management. Mr. Lucas has continued his professional development through several programs and projects within the Caribbean, US, Austria, and Israel. At the station in Antigua, Mr. Lucas has taken the opportunity to transform the unit on the theme, Project Oasis. I would imagine that's a very appropriate name to Antigua, which encapsulates the challenges associated with agricultural production in Antigua and Barbuda. Amidst the issues of water scarcity and drought, it remains focused on issues such as sustainable agriculture, water resource management, capacity building, and improving climate resilience. I would say Mr. Paul Lucas is well placed to talk to you about climate smart agriculture and climate smart compliance in hot pepper production, both for berry and seed. Without any further ado, I will hand you over to Paul Lucas.
Hello and good morning. My name is Paul Lucas. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Gregory Robin. And today, as he said, I will be looking at hot pepper production. So the first step, obviously, when you're looking at any form of production is to plan. What you need to consider as you go into this particular project, you have to look at the acreage, you look at the variety which you intend to select, the population, the density, and the purpose. All of these would play a crucial will be crucial factors in determining how you proceed. From my experience, it's very important that you map the area, you have a good understanding of where is going to be the location, the soil type, a number of characteristics that might affect the growth of the hot pepper. The timelines are also very important. We're recognizing that there needs to be adequate preparation at each stage in order for the overall system to work. So you would, in advance of the production, you would look to procure the necessary inputs, you look to prepare the land, and you look to obviously have a very thorough management system. Consistency is very important as you look at any form of production, because we know that the weather may change, the number of factors may change in terms of the pests, the weeds, and these are things that we need to consistently look at. So the first step, you're looking at the seeds. What you would hope is that the seeds that you select have good vigor, high germination percentages, and uniform growth eventually when you start to plant them. This can be done, of course, by looking at the harvest and what is selected from that harvest. The shape, the size, the color. Eventually there will be the grading and the sorting of the seeds. You would have the seed extraction, and you would also have the seed quality testing. And that allows the person who then receives the seeds to have a certain amount of certainty that the quality of seeds is quite high. And in relation to that, you would also look at germination tests to see how high these germination percentages are. CARDI is very much involved in the production of seeds. So what we would tend to do, for example, in Antigua and Belize, we use the seeds which we produce, knowing that the quality assurance is quite high. In many cases, above 80% germination rate. You know that there's a lot of vigor behind the seeds, and you could expect to see germination within as early as 7 days. So for us, that is a big factor when you look at the hot pepper. So at this stage, you can see very clearly these are seedlings that are just about between 7 to 14 days, and you can see there's the uniform growth. And not only that, there's almost 100% germination in each of the cells, which happen to be the 98 cell trays we tend to use for the hot pepper. Usually they could be sold 1 ounce packages, and that would contain roughly 6,000 seeds. In our operation, when we use about half of an acre in the production system, we would tend to only use half an ounce, which would translate to 3,000 or so seeds. Seedling management. This early phase of the hot pepper production is especially important. One of the things you need to pay close attention to would be the management of the water regime. And that would involve you checking regularly the cells to see how much moisture is still available to the plant. And you also look at basically how the plant is developing. Any signs of stress, any sign of damage, be it from pests or any disease, would need to be rectified at a very early time. And that is because, obviously, as you can see in the pictures, at this stage, they're very close together, and you recognize that anything that could affect one of these plants could rapidly pass through the population. So at this 5-week interval is now, you can probably drench these seedlings, and using a mixture of 20-20-20 NPK. And this is in advance of eventually making the plant hardened for a period of about a week. What you're seeing here in the hardening phase is really you expose the seedlings now to the open conditions where they will be more acclimatized before they're transplanted into the field. So what happens is you would transfer the seedlings from the first slide that you see after the 5 weeks, and you transfer that outside where there's direct sunlight, where there's an increased wind velocity, reduce humidity. So basically there's a lot more pressure on the actual seedlings, and that is sometimes necessary in order for the plant, this young seedling, to better adjust when you transplant them. So before you even get the seedling, into the field, what you need to do is look carefully at land preparation. In many cases, you would do the first plow, the second plow. This is obviously to break up the soil and to ensure that when you eventually do the rotivation and the banking, that there's a greater uniformity. And as the earlier discussions mentioned, the soil is very important component of the system, and making sure that the seeds, the seedlings, when they're transferred, they have adequate space and room to properly expand and occupy the area. I think is very important. So you look at these interventions, rotivation of the beds, the installation of the drip irrigation, and the application of the mulch. In the case of Antigua, where we do suffer from periodic droughts, this year being similar to many other years, reduced rainfall, intense heat conditions, temperatures, high heat index. These are systems that can be used to help improve the production of the hot pepper. And obviously you want to test the drip system after you create the holes, because you want to ensure that the moisture is made available to the young seedling at that critical stage when it now comes from the hardening process. So remember, in the seedling phase, it would be under more sheltered conditions. And as you move into the open field, you would expect there to be harsher conditions that place additional stress on the young seedlings. So you really want to make sure the drip system is working. You want to make sure the plastic mulch is intact and available in the field. So how do we do that? Land preparation. So you have an example of the tractor that you would use in terms of the plowing, the first and the second. And this is a very important implement that we would use here at the station. And what it does, if you can see, is really, it allows you to do two processes at the same time. At the bottom end, you're seeing the plastic mulch, the black plastic mulch. And what happens is also able to accommodate the drip system and the drip line. So what would happen is you apply both of these things as we see in the next slide. So for example, what would happen is one individual as well as put in the mulch as needed. So here's an example of two individuals who are working alongside the tractor operator. If you can see in the first slide on the left, there's the drip line, and beneath there's the black plastic mulch. So as this tractor moves forward, it would continue to pull the mulch and the drip line, and ensuring that all the beds are completely covered and secure. And this is important as you talk about, again, moisture and water conservation being maintained close to the plant. And again, the use of the drip system is very critical because it allows the water to go closer to the root zone, and it reduces the amount of wastage. So the precision is there, and it allows the farmer to be able to put the moisture where it is required, which is to the root zone of the crop. So the installation of the irrigation system and the mulch at the same time. As you can see in this, these are a number of beds which have been created. And the final process, again, the drip line and the mulch. Beds would already be prepared, and the tractor operator would then be able to do so. Once the drip irrigation and the mulch have been installed, the next stage would then be to cut the holes into the mulch so that the seedlings can then be transplanted into the field. So here we have the measuring tape, if you can see, in white, and along the length, you would measure the distance that you determine. And in our case, we would use 60 centimeters, or 2 feet spacing, and a single one row along each bed. At this stage now, you're seeing the seedlings being transplanted. And if you look closely, you see a bit of soil around the seedling. The reason for that is as we experience the increased heat, what we found really is that you want to avoid the plastic mulch rubbing against the young seedling. And because of the high temperatures and the ability of black plastic to absorb some amount of heat, you really want to prevent that friction between the plastic mulch and the young seedling. Okay, so field management. Now that these seedlings are into the field, what do you have to look for? You have to look at weed management, you have to look at pest management, and you have to look at fertilizer management. And all these are important and really essential if you're supposed to get a proper crop in the end. And that's what we hope to accomplish. So what you're looking at here is the process of really the manual weeding, where you go through the field, you look for the small weeds, which because of the plastic mulch, it also helps to restrict the growth of weeds. So ideally, what you would find is closer to the base of the plant, the open area is where the weeds would eventually come. At an earlier stage, it's probably recommended to manually weed so you don't use too much chemicals as well. And from our experience, keeping the field very clean allows you to really have a better performance in terms of the crops. And so in this, we're looking at the different weeds that we're doing, but at the same time, we're also checking the plants, doing a bit of scouting and monitoring to see how the seedlings are coming along. So within the first week of transplanting the seedlings, we then look to see if any have been damaged, if any have died, and we look to replace those seedlings. So this is one of the important stages as you go into the field management, regular scouting. This period of time within the first month is very important that you see how the plants are developing and you try your best to identify any pests, any problems that you would find in the field. So weed management, again, there's manual and there's also the chemical treatment. In this particular photo on the left, one thing that we saw that we don't usually see is some slugs. And one of the things that they did basically was to go under the plastic mulch around the areas, because remember, generally speaking, the area is quite dry. And what we recognize, obviously, the slugs, they would want the water, the moisture in the water. So one of the pests at the early stages as they start to come, for this particular picture, you see is the slug. So you go through, again, you identify the pest, see if there's any damage, you look at the leaves correctly and see if there are any signs of stress, any sign of disease, damage, and address it at an early stage. On the right now, you're seeing the uniform growth, you're seeing that the plants look well established now. And at this stage, you would then look at the fertilizers that could be used to even further increase the growth and to improve the performance of the crop. Again, it is important because the area that we're growing the hot peppers would have limited rainfall water in the conditions in Antigua, especially. For chemical treatment, you can look at using any of these chemicals and these herbicides. The pro, for the pre-emergent, you do it before you even begin really to ensure that the weeds are removed. The Carista, the Fusilade, just in case of the grasses, the glyphosate for the broadleaf. And these are just some of the chemicals that you could tend to use while you're looking at managing the weeds in the field. Okay. So here we have a picture showing the uniform growth. And again, the individual in the picture is manually weeding. So you see the importance of properly maintaining the field and to ensure that at this stage, the plants continue to grow in a uniform manner. They continue to produce, they continue. You look at the architecture of the hot pepper in the field, and you recognize in most cases from this picture, it's quite uniform. And that's what you hope to see during the production phase of the hot pepper. But there are pests and there are diseases that you need to consider even before you get into production. There are common pests such as the thrips, the mites, the bud moth, and the phytophthora. These are things that scouting really help to identify quickly. And the idea is that you really get to these pests before they become so damaging to your crop that you actually suffer losses. So as soon as you do your usual scouting and you come across any of these, the idea is that shortly thereafter, you apply the necessary chemical, the insecticides that are required. So looking at one example of the pest, this is the bud moth. And what happens is it would get into the hot pepper production before around the flowering stage. So before the berry even begins to form, this is something that's laid within the flower. So as it grows and develops, this will eventually emerge eating from the inside out. And in many cases, this is something that you would try to address before. You would see some evidence of this once you open it up, but even before, you might see it trying to emerge from the little holes. So this is one of the things that you really need to be careful of. Thrips, again, very important, and you want to address these things very quickly, because one thing about the production on a fairly large scale is that once a particular pest is found within your population, it could rapidly spread because it is very, it basically has everything it needs within your plot. And the idea is that you address it as quickly as possible. So again, some examples of chemicals that can be used, insecticides could be used. You got the triclan, you got the pyrite, the caprid. Many may be familiar to you. The idea is that you really try to use whichever chemical works best. If you find that the pests are showing some degree of resistance, the idea is that you would change or alternate the use of the chemicals so that they don't get so accustomed to one particular chemical and eventually build up the resistance to that chemical. Additionally, you look at the fungicides, Phyton 27, Amistar, Reader-Mill, Acrobat. And again, this is something that you apply based on your evaluation of the fields, based on your ongoing monitoring. And that is why it needs to be consistent. A bit about the irrigation, and you're looking at the irrigation and the system as well as the fertigation system. And in this, we really have Mr. Bradbury Brown. He's talking a bit about the use of the fertigation system in conjunction with the drip system. So what he's showing you now is the Ventura injector. I don't know if, I hope you can hear. So he's explaining what he's doing.
3 more minutes, huh? Paul, you have
Yes, please.
You have 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes. Okay, let me continue then. Okay, so basically what Mr. Bradbury Brown was explaining was his use of the fertigation system. Is used with the drip system, and what it does is use water-soluble fertilizers in applying the fertilizer directly to the plant. And what happens is you would mix it in the drum as seen, and the Ventura injector would basically pull the aqueous solution and apply it to your plot. And in this case, it works well because, again, it limits the amount of wastage because it goes directly to the crop with the drip with the irrigation. So you're looking at things such as the 2020 fertilizer, that's more in the seedling phase. As you go into the field, we look at these these fertilizers, which can help in the management and basically improve performance of the hot pepper. So eventually what you hope to see is the harvest. And in this example, you're seeing a picture of the Scotch bonnet and the performance of the Scotch bonnet. These individuals are seeing the field, and as you can see in the first slide, again, there's a uniformity across the board, and the persons there in the field are able to see the performance of the berry. So again, you see how it's done. And this is the same field that you saw the young seedlings in. So this is basically going from the very start, from the seedling phase all the way to where you harvest. And this is what you hope to see. And this is something that requires consistency, and it requires a bit of vigilance in order to maintain, because field management is very important in terms of the production process. So again, the harvest, you can see many of the pictures, a big harvest. There's all of these containers are filled with the hot pepper, and this is what you hope to see at the end of the day. Thank you very much. And that was really a bit about the production of the hot pepper. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for a very detailed presentation on hot pepper production. Can I be here? Is everybody hearing me clearly? I was told I was sounding muffled. Am I clear?
Yes,
Hello?
you are. Yes,
I believe you're clear now. Yes, please.
I'm clear. Okay. We'll go into the next presentation by Umaira, and after that, we will have the question and answer session. I will go straight into Umaira's introduction. Umaira Avila Rostant is the CARDI representative in Belize. Umaira holds an MPhil in plant science, specializing in plant genetics from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Presently, she's the focal point for the Coconut Regional Project, second phase in Belize, as well as the coordinator for the grain production program at the CARDI Belize unit, serving as the Institute's plant biotechnologist. Agriculture is her passion. She has worked in the sector for 30 years in various capacities and has extensive experience working directly with farmers in the Caribbean region. Her goal is to encourage through education and adoption of new technologies in agriculture, especially in the areas of plant biotechnology, low-cost agricultural systems, germplasm collection, and seed improvement. Also ICTs and use of new digital technologies in agriculture. One of her ambitions is to see that the Caribbean and Latin America work close together towards a common goal in the agricultural sector and helping to breach the language barrier. I will now hand you over to Umaira to do the second presentation on hot pepper. Umaira, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you for that presentation. I want to please ask if by any chance I get disconnected. We're having some issue with the internet. We're hoping that everything will be okay. Okay, so let's start. Can I share my screen? Okay, so are you seeing my screen? Anybody seeing my screen? Okay, we working with hot peppers, and as Paul refers, you could see all the management required for this crop. But the reason we are here is because climate is changing, and that has given a new term to agriculture, which is climate resilience, or at least becoming what we call climate smart. So therefore, in order to know that, we need to know what is the situation. Yesterday, we got from the IPCC report that we are correct. And one thing that caught my attention is this: the landmark study warns on increasingly extreme heat wave, droughts, and flooding, and a key temperature limit being broken in just over a decade. Before that, it says human activity is changing the climate. And that is what climate smart is, knowing that your situation, whatever you use it, it will have an effect either in the short, medium, or long term in the environment, not only for you, but for everybody, including future generations. So what they're saying, over a decade, we have 1.5 degrees higher temperature. So with this in mind, let's go to what is climate smart in harvesting. As you can see, Paul referred to all the part that is vegetative production, which is between 6 and 8 weeks. However, harvesting in hot peppers takes between 20 and 23 weeks of the life cycle of that plant. Therefore, harvesting is a period of the plant that is not just the picking, but the maintenance that that plant has to have in order to be productive for all that period. You have to know what you expect. According to the plant itself, it has a capacity, if you plant 4,500 plants, to give you around 10,000 pounds, and you have up to 20 pickings. That depends on the management, how you manage that crop. Okay, so you also have to know the environmental conditions on where that plant thrives. And in hot peppers, that include temperature, light intensity, soil requirement. Already Paul said what are the practice that they put in. But one thing I want to bring to your attention is the best temperature to grow hot peppers. Hot pepper grows or thrive at 25 to 35 degrees, which is 77 Fahrenheit and 95. However, if it's increased 1.5, you have to know that this temperature is changing. And you know that in some days, this temperature is over. Now, what is the effect with higher temperature? Anytime temperature goes higher than 30 degrees, inhibit pollen production. The pollen is no longer fertile. That affects immediately your harvest and your production. You will have no pollen, therefore you will have no fruit. Cause flower drop-ins, reduce plant growth, and reduce fruit scalding. Therefore, it's a direct effect on the productivity of that plant if the temperature increases over 30 degrees, which in the Caribbean is becoming more than normal. Increased susceptibility to pests, of course. High temperature, it means drought. Drought means increased effect of pests. And in temperature lower, that is very difficult, but it could happen, the plant just stops growing. The other effect is light intensity. The Caribbean is known for how bright the sun could be. However, for hot peppers, this could be, especially for the fruit, this could be a factor that could actually damage the quality. So the plants require high light intensity. However, when it's too high, it could cause fruit scalding, blouching, and abortion of flowers, again, reduction of productivity. On the other hand, if they have excessive shade, then the fruit and the flower aborts. Okay, so pepper seedling in the nursery could manage some shade, but then the fields that will be affected. Rainfalls, the plant require between 600 and 1,200, with the maximum requirement in the vegetative plants, vegetative growth. But droughts, really have an effect on the plant. So the formation, abortion of flowers are generally affecting directly the quality of the fruits, and that reduces yield. Excessive moisture, well, you know that excessive moisture means bacteria, fungus, and other issues in hot peppers. Soil, well, poor drainage, well, simply means issues that it will affect the quality of the plant. And fertility is directly affects the quality, okay? So one thing that you have to know of harvesting is all what you want is a quality product. When you have that quality product, then you consider that the crop is successful. Therefore, all the effort should be that the product not only is quality, but is managed in a way that it will get to the client in a quality that he willing to pay the price. Here we have some of the products that CARDI work in, Moruga Red, and you could see that this crop is 98 days from sowing. And 98 days is more or less the time this plant will be exposed to the environment. Now, we in the Caribbean work with a particular type of capsicum called Chinensis. Why? Because they land races. And this is important. When you are trying to work with a crop that is already present and adapted, it makes it easier for the plant or for the crop to readjust. Chinensis is a crop that is adjusted and it has managed itself to survive all the changes in this part of the world. So when to harvest? The maturity index. Many people do not know when a hot pepper is ready to harvest. Well, it depends on the markets you're planning to put this product. If it's for a fresh market, you're working for a size that your market wants, firm, and you want at least 50% of the coloration change. You could see these fruits here. The green ones are immature, but these changes could actually start, they are ready to go, because when it's too ripe, it might pass the time when it goes to the market. However, when you're doing it for seed, one process that CARDI does, you're actually looking for a product that is totally changed. Why? Because that means the seed maturity is there, and that is what we are looking for. So what are the minimum requirements for a good crop? Well, first of all, it has to be clean. And as you know, you cannot wash hot peppers because that will increase pests and diseases. So therefore, you have to make sure this crop is clean from the field. And therefore, you have to make sure it's clean, it's fresh, mature, that I already showed you how it's maturity, free of diseases, free of soil and debris, no overripe, meaning not soft or leathery, free from microbial infestation, no mechanical damage, and the stem is intact. Why the stem is important? Because at the moment that you detach that, the fruit will start decaying. Okay, so it actually extends the life of the fruit. Harvesting. The best time to harvest is early in the morning or late in the evening, where neither you nor the plant is stressed. Remember, you are causing a harm or an injury by detaching this crop. Harvesting during or immediate after rain is not recommended. Water, bacteria, all this could have a problem. Detach the fruit from the plant with the stem intact. Pepper are placed in field trays and not bags. This is a practice that sometimes is difficult, but the idea is that hot pepper breaks down very easily. So therefore, using crate will guarantee that no pressure is put on the fruit, but actually in the crate. Protect from direct sunlight and keep off the ground. Okay, this off should be there. So here you see some samples. When they harvest, and here they detach it. This detaches to when they go into processing, and here is when they park it from farm, trying to avoid that it gets contaminated. So, oh, sorry. Now, hot pepper are easily damaged and it should be handled carefully. This is something very important, especially if you're trying to target the export market, because the crop will take a time that it will, any pressure could show damage in that time. Fruit with cake should not be placed in bucket or feed crates. Clean and disinfect harvesting containers with minimum the spread of, to minimize the spread of disease. All containers should be light colored, ventilated, and shallow. What that means, generally, this is because heat reflection. Remember, you don't want any dark color that absorb heat, because heat will transfer to the fruit. So the intention of light colors is to reflect the heat, and the ventilation is to move air through it. When processing. Now, in the case of seed production, which is what we will do, I will show you, but this also goes to places that do mash for consumption. So here you have a process. Now, harvesting, processing hot peppers is very pungent, and your eyes and your whole face will react. So if you could do it in an open space, it will reduce that potency to go into your face. Once the product is extracted, you could use natural method, which is the sun, to dry and to bring it to quality that you desire. Now, after I went through our process, I also used the C-SAC to evaluate how climate smart is really our process at CARDI. It's important to understand that just like all the farmers, CARDI also is adjusting, because we need to introduce practices that in the past not necessarily were priority. Now we are doing it. So here are what I found. Our resource conservation of land use, water, nutrient, and labor were more on the area of average and needed improvement. Why? Because all in climate smart or resource conservation seeking to use natural methods, while not necessarily in large scale production is something that we are accustomed to do. We still have to adjust. Energy use, we are very efficient in some cases, especially when it comes to the use of light. We tend to use the outdoors a lot to do our processes, as you saw in Paul's presentation and in my presentation. Transportation, infrastructure, also we are improving. And safety, we try to, as much as possible, to make sure the whole process is safe and is balanced as much as we can. Diversity, land clearance. In this part, over the years, we have improved the way we manage our processes. And our results was showing that is good. Also, we are working in the greenhouse gas reduction, and we hoping that soon this will mean that we will be able to be more effective. One part that we didn't use, and I myself will have to work more, is the use of manual. It's something that we not necessarily promote because the crop, as I told you, cannot be washed. So we are trying to incorporate it, and we will have to work with this a little. So in summary, we became what is called as average with number 3. no, sorry, number 2 label. And therefore we were when it's coming to climate smart, we could do more, and we're hoping to adopt more changes. So thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Myra. I thought that presentation, the order in which it was presented, first Paul did the conventional method of hot pepper production. Then you address some of the issues of climate smart and the concerns of changing weather conditions, temperature, humidity, light intensity, etc. And then you did the compliance bit, showing that at least we're well on our way to becoming compliant, and what we have to look for in terms of the kind of technologies we need to apply. I thought that in terms of a lot of the methods and technologies mentioned in the previous presentations, some of it could be adopted for the hot pepper production systems. My only concern was that there may be an additional cost to adoption of some of those technologies. So without any further comments on the presentation, I will open the floor for questions and answers. Please place your questions and answers in the question and answer chat. It makes it easier for us to monitor the questions and comments coming in. So the floor is now open. I don't see any questions or comments in the question and answer chart.
I saw a question and I would like to answer it. Natalie Francois, she says, why is it too difficult to get seats from CARDI in Trinidad? Natalie, my recommendation to you is to contact CARDI and find out, because now we have CASH, which is the commercial arm of CARDI, and they are the distributors of CARDI seats in Trinidad. So maybe that's the issue, that you not contacting the correct persons. Of course, we sometimes have limitations, but they will be able to tell you if they have or not available seats at the time.
Thank you, Myra. I think CASH is well positioned to, as the seed facilitator and distributor for CARDI in the region. Once the request is passed to CASH, they will provide the client or the consumer with the guidelines for ordering and paying for the seed. I see a question there. How do I get to watch this session again? I need to see Mr. Paul's presentation. I think the webinar organizers are going to send a package to each of the participants, and that would include the PowerPoint presentation and audio. So all the attendees will be able to get the information from all the presentations that were made.
Okay, Dr. Robin, we have some few questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you want me to read the first one.
Yeah.
It's from Navin, and I think this question is directed to Paul. Are the chemicals treatments accepted by the UK EU import requirements? I think Paul spoke a lot about insecticide. So Navin had a question about whether or not these chemical treatments that he was referring to are acceptable for importation.
Paul, can you answer this? Right. While we wait on Paul, I'm going to take another
Paul, you mute.
question from
Paul, you
the
mute.
Oh, hey, good morning. As it relates to the chemicals being used, in many cases, you need to investigate on the requirements on the other side. For us, we know that these chemicals can be used here in Antigua for the purposes that we require, which is for the seed production. And in terms of the actual use of the berry, though, I think that might be a different requirement as opposed to us who use it to have the seeds eventually produced.
Okay,
Also add, sorry, Dr. Robin. I also have to add that Nandesco some years ago was trying to comply for foreign markets. At least for Trinidad, they created a list. And you could try to get it from Nandesco for the exportation of fresh hot peppers. But as Paul said, you need to know what are the requirements from the exporter in order to know if you comply. In the time that Nandesco and Trinidad did the exercise, they even had officers going to the field to make sure the farmers was compliant. So it will be a one-to-one work with the farmer if they have a secure market for export.
there's another question here. What are the levels of pests in fields now if compared as before? And its maintenance costs associated to the cost of production. I think they're concerned about the pest levels as it is now when compared with before, and the maintenance costs associated with the cost of producers. In other
Yes.
words,
So the question basically speaks to the increased incidence of pests. That is part of the question. And the concern is really a good concern. What we found in general, because of the prolonged use of particular chemicals, some of the pests will actually build a resistance to these chemicals. Part of the reason why I provided a number of options was basically because you recognize that there needs to be some variation. If one person chooses to use the chemical over subsequent cycles, what you would find is eventually maybe the 5th generation or so of the pest would build up such a resistance that it will no longer be as effective as initially intended. So the idea that we're going with is you have to continue to carefully monitor the response of the pest to the chemicals, and if possible, vary the use of the chemicals that you select. So that's why you always keep your options open, but it requires you to carefully monitor. And another thing about the pest, as I said, is important to identify the pest at an early stage before it actually begins to increase in terms of its population. If you miss it, I think a lot of people, when you scope and you don't really see the underside of the leaf and you don't really check closely, what happens is sometimes people overlook the damage until it is so far blown that is now much more difficult for the individual to really control the pest. So the idea, I'm not saying is as always possible, but I'm saying if you continue to monitor very closely, what the idea is you identify the pest before it reaches such a great population within your plot. So the idea is that you really be consistent in terms of your monitoring and your treatment and the use of different chemicals
I'm going back to the question and answer chat. There's a comment. I have spoken to the reps and I was told with COVID, it is getting worse with respect to seed availability. And then the other question, which deals again with seed availability, does CARDI and Antigua have hot peppers for sale at this point? Not seed, hot peppers. Paul, can you answer that? Paul?
Dr. Roman, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You just quickly, sorry about that. I was trying to use the headphones, but don't worry. Can you just quickly repeat it? The question?
Does CARDI and Antigua have hot peppers for sale?
Oh, at this moment, no. Sorry. Unfortunately, we do not. We have them in production, but they're not at the stage where we can harvest them.
Has COVID affected our seed availability, Omara?
Yes, over the years, one of the issues with COVID, I think more than COVID is drought, okay? I think it had a combination, at least for the Belize unit last year, it had a strange combination of hurricane, drought, and COVID all together, which reduced the amount of seed we could produce. Nonetheless, we produce, and right now we have available, and we enter in a new cycle this year. But one factor that I wanted to bring up with the question that Paul responded about cost because of pests. In the case of Belize, whitefly has become a very, very concern, and the major problem is management. So right now they have experiments with predators and fungus to see if we could reduce the effect of whitefly in the pest, because so many crops growing and so many hosts, the pest never breaks down. It's always producing. So of course, hot pepper is one of the preferred, and that is the problem. So yes, they have an issue. It's not specifically for hot peppers, but they have pests that has become, they have cycles that never break. So one and another crop and another crop, that is where farmers have to realize the importance of crop rotation, or at least communities, because we have, in Belize in particular, we have communities producing hot peppers. And if they have poor management, destruction, and leaf material, that causes that the pest grows and grows. So cost of production, yes, is more due to management. A lot of people are moving into greenhouses, but again, greenhouses will only work if you have a good management that nothing enters in, because once a pest is in, taking it out, it will be much more difficult than in fields. Thank you, Dr. Ron.
I see a comment here. I am not too sure, and that comes from Natalie Francois. You can't remember seeing the use of, but I think she wants to say, I can't remember seeing the use of any calcium salt in the presentation. What do you use it? What do you use it? I think she means what do you use it for? That's what I can make out of the comment / question.
So she's asking about.
Well, if Natalie can rephrase the question and send it back into the chat. Is there any hands-on training being offered by CARDI? Umairo? I think you can leave your mic.
Generally, trainings are planned based on activities. So if we know a community requires a training, and we work with the Ministry of Agriculture and we organize the training. What we have though is our open door system, where if we are doing an activity, we're trying to have a field day or opportunities for persons to see the activities we are doing. Not necessarily all the time, because with COVID and all the situation is you have to limit the amount of persons you have in the facility. But training wise, yes, CARDI is always willing to do training. It needs to be scheduled. We prefer if to do it through the Ministry of Agriculture of the country. We organize with them and we support the work they are doing. So we have situations where farmers come and say, okay, we want to have a training. Well, it's challenging for us to just prepare training for one person. What we try to do is community groups, and always we try to work with the ministries and the countries, because at the end, that is why they have the extension service. And I know they try their best to give, to have that work up to date.
Thank you, Mario. clearly that CARDI provides training. It's not at the individual level, it's at the community, group, and extension level. Paul Onika Lewis is asking for the CARDI Antigua number. So I guess you know who that is. You probably don't have to get that number to her. She probably wants to make some orders for seeds.
Okay, so she wants to reach the number. Put it in the chat or?
Yeah. Danielle Clark Macpherson. She has her hands raised. Shanyon, can you place your question in the chat? Because the coordinator have to let you ask the question. They don't have the control over that.
Greg, I have given Shannon permission to speak, so she can go ahead and ask a question.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Shannon, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for putting on such a beautiful webinar. So I noticed the first presenter didn't say much about greenhouse, hot pepper farming in greenhouse. However, my question is that I noticed that our ecosystem is depleting, right? And as a result, some people have to do hand pollination. What I have done is I plant some flowers to attract bees. So can I ask you, is there any other way to help pollination to our hot peppers? Thank you.
Paul, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes. Hey, thank you very much for the question. Definitely the use of bees is important. I'm not sure if there are classes on apiculture, but what happens in many cases, even for us at the station, we also recognize by having the bees closer to the field, we are able to increase the production. So I believe for us, how we did it, we actually installed 1 or 2 hives by the station, knowing full well these will be very important in terms of the process of pollination. So we don't do the manual pollination. We actually use, and about the use of the greenhouses, again, as Amaya pointed out, you have to be very cautious in terms of that system. But once the management is there, yes, you can expect to see increased production. What we also recognize is that in the field, open field, there's a lot more stress on the plants as you recognize there are changes in the environment with increased drought, in reduced water, and these are things that would affect the production. So in some cases, people have gone that path and chosen to use the greenhouses or shade houses rather to really produce the hot pepper. It's just something you have to carefully manage, and again, ensure that no pest gets inside, because what we, from my experience and seeing it firsthand, the production levels in some cases can increase, but at the same time, the susceptibility to the pest damage, and once it comes in, it is also equally as dramatic. So what I would say is continue along the path that you've been doing, but for us, we would say even working with some beekeepers, I don't know if there's the opportunity to make that synergy whereby they could help install perhaps a hive box close to the operation, so that could actually improve your production levels by your farm.
Thank you, Paul. Next question or comment. For persons entering the hot pepper field, please explain the challenges while handling peppers to the body, especially during harvest. In other words, what kind of effects pepper has by going into the field, harvesting, and dealing with the post-harvest activities. So Myra, you want to answer that?
Yeah, yes, okay. So I don't know if you could see my screen. I just wanted to answer. Somebody asked if we could give them the manual links. Here they had 2. But let me go to harvest. And one thing that you have to remember is that hot pepper has capsicum, and capsicum is hot, and they have a reaction in the body. So your body, the more you rub against it and the more you touch it, it could actually affect you, especially if you're allergic. So nowadays, determines check if you're allergic to it. Also, you have to be aware that they have chemical products in the fields. Therefore, you have to use the correct gear. A lot of people want to go bare feet, short pants to get hot peppers. And the truth is, you started to get a lot of what is in the field on you constantly, and that is dangerous. So you see this guy here, he's detaching and he's using gloves. And the reason he's using gloves is because he realized that after a while, that will transfer to your hands, to your eyes, to your mouth, and it will give you a lot of issue. Also here, when you see in processing, this person decided to put, if you pay attention, he's using a crocus bag, okay? And the reason he's doing this is because the area that he wanted to protect, it keep getting these splashes. And that smell in a closed environment, it could make you faint. I had the possibility of working in a factory that was processing hot peppers. And when we had to process hot peppers, the same factory, some others did coconut water. And after a few days, you could even taste coconut water, hot pepper in coconut water. That's how pungent is it, okay? So just be aware of it. Do not give children to go and pick up. And especially when you're doing it, wash your hands, use gloves, because once you pick it, you will get it in your hand and it will go in your body. And check if you are allergic. Some people get swollen. Some people cannot breathe. And that depends a lot of your reaction. So just attention to it before.
Okay, thank you, Myron, for a very detailed explanation on the interaction of persons with hot pepper in field and in sangers. In the past, CARDI was instrumental in developing the Manuga red hot pepper. Is CARDI doing more work in developing other varieties? What's the status of that? Follow on Myron.
Well, it's sad that we don't have, we should have somebody from Barbados here. Yes, we have the collection. We don't have, I should say we have a new breeder on board. So soon we will start crossbreeding again. But today we have a maintenance. We're maintaining the collections as much as possible. That was done by Mr. Adams. As you know, he did a lot of work on the varieties. And that is work that is being now produced from his work. And is where we have these varieties that you see here, which are, let me just show it to you, that became commercial. Also in Barbados, we have a collection of 100 different accessions that they are maintaining. And it's also in Barbados where we just got a plant breeder, and I hope that she will start to do crosses. But remember, the crosses are expensive. So what we are trying to do, not only just crosses, but to stabilize these varieties that could become commercially produced. And they have a name in the region. From here, you don't see an scorpion, which it has been picked up very fast and it's being produced worldwide.
Paul, while we're on that topic of breeds and so on, are we doing any work with respect to stabilizing the continuous stabilization of the Western Israel?
At the moment with the stability, no. At the moment, we, as Omira pointed out, we're just maintaining the current selection that we have at the station, the Moruga Red and the Scotch Bonnet. In terms of the stabilization process, the more recent work was done by Dr. Roberts, I think. And since then, we haven't really done the full stabilization process from start to finish.
Okay, thank you. Well, as Myra said, the breeder on board now, we should see some action in those areas. Here in Barbados, it has been proven that the use of row covers can increase production and longevity of the plants. Are they being used in Antigua, Jamaica, and other parts of the Caribbean? For row covers.
Could you just repeat that again?
Here in
question?
Barbados, it has been proven that the use of row covers can increase production and longevity of the plants. Have they been used in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean?
Tony Rollins. Okay. Yeah, I was actually in Barbados when some of that work was being done. So it's funny, Tony, it's good to see you. At least your message and your question. No, we're not using the row covers in Antigua at the moment. And again, there's a high cost attached to it. While there are systems that could improve production, there's also the idea of additional costs and the cost of operation. So in Antigua at the moment, no, we're not using it. In some cases, we've discussed it, but we haven't gone about acquiring the materials necessary to do so. And yes, in Barbados, around 2017, no, 2015. Yeah, there was a project that was done, a particular project, which was looking at improved agricultural techniques. And one of the demonstrations done was the use of row covers in the production process. And yes, there were very encouraging results from that. But no, not at this time. In Jamaica, the possibility probably exists. The possibility probably exists. I'm not too familiar, but I believe I've seen pictures in Jamaica where that has occurred already.
For the rest of our participants who may not know what a row cover is, can you explain to them what they mean by row covers? Because
yes,
I'm not sure all the participants know what we're talking about.
Okay. So what happens is in the field, what would happen is you would erect a structure in the field which completely covers the bed. So on both sides, in some cases, it could be done with a curve to the top, but in some cases, it could be a more rigid structure. But the idea of it is that you cover the entire row of the bed to ensure that there's reduced incidence of the pest damage because you use a insect-proof netting, and you also increase the humidity within, and you also increase the water retention and conservation. So the idea of it is to really maintain the moisture again around the root zone and to ensure that basically there's less stress on the plant as it goes through the production phase. I actually have some pictures from Barbados. Let me see if I could find, but the row cover, yeah, is a system that could be used in terms of increasing the productivity on the farm, but it's costly. There's a cost attached to it. And everyone might not have the resources necessary to do so, but it can be done, and it does show results.
I want to suggest that you send
a picture
with some descriptors to the coordinator of the webinar. So that
yeah, no problem. Yeah, because actually the same project that would have been undertaken, I think that was done, and CARDI is on the same area of land as the ministry. So what you would find is a lot of the work that's done at CARDI is directly transferred to the ministry, and there's a huge amount of synergies made between CARDI and the Ministry of Agriculture. So because it was done at the station, it allows people to see the work and to see how it could improve the system that they're currently implementing. So yes, I can find those pictures and I can share those pictures with you.
I want to show, well, I got it on the internet, but I was looking for one that I have from Barbados. So it's something like this. So you could see, you could see in it. This is what row cover looks like. I was looking for one from Barbados, but
yeah, Myra, okay.
You found it?
Yeah, I found some pictures from Barbados.
Okay.
Um,
Let me
covers.
close it so you could share.
Yeah. All right. Let me see.
You go ahead.
Wait a minute, looking for the. Okay, so I can share my screen now.
Go ahead.
Let me see. Is that to the top? Okay, share my screen. This here.
Could the row cover be a climate smart technology?
So here you have the roll cover.
Right.
And actually, back in my younger days, that would be me in the field. The idea is that you set up these structures, and over these structures now, you would have the netting. The idea, again, transplant the hot peppers into the field, and you cover each of the rows going down. So this is the example, and this was done again by Graham Hall, and at Graham Hall is where the Ministry of Agriculture also has their field station. Yeah. So this is an example of the, so what you would do is secure the base of each of the frames to the bed, and you allow it to run the length of the bed. And the last stage is to, after you put in, transplant the hot pepper, you would then put the insect-proof netting over the structure. So there's an example. So
right. Thanks very much, Paul. I saw a question or comment from Onika Lewis asking if that technology is available in Antigua. If it's not, I suspect you might have to do a little work on that to demonstrate that to some of the Antiguan farmers on the CARDI station. That's just a suggestion.
Okay.
There's a couple points I covered this one by Onika Lewis about availability in Antigua. Cheyenne is asking against sargassum weed as a mulch and cover. Any of you have that experience? Umaira, do you have any experience with
sargassum? Well, sargassum need to be washed if you put it as a mulch, okay? First, you have to be able to dry it properly. It's a time-consuming process. So once you could get it and you could wash it, salinity affects hot peppers. If you saw it in my presentation, one of the issues is salinity is an issue with hot peppers. Hot pepper is excessive moisture and salinity is an issue. So therefore, you need to wash the sargassum extremely well. Otherwise, you will have issues in hot peppers.
Thank you. I know our colleague, and I mentioned it in another session, from my Andrea Vieira worked with sargassum in St. Lucia, both as a mulch and a soil ameliorator. I know I know Andrea is in Antigua now, Paul. So I don't know if you could follow up with her on the use of sargassum as a mulch and a soil ameliorator. She's at the University of West Indies in Antigua. Paul, you with us?
Yeah. So she would have done some work with the sargassum, but I think it was with some specific crops, looking at, I think, both the tomato and sweet potato in some cases.
Right.
No, but in terms of the hot pepper, I'm not too sure how it would translate. I can't say because I've never.
So when she said as a mulch, I think what Umaira is saying, and I think it was recognized because I attended a sargassum conference, that you got to process the sargassum, you got to wash it, and get it to a stage, and then you got to do certain levels of chemical testing to know exactly what you have in the sargassum and stuff like that. So there's some preliminary work done, and I think the questions have been asked, not in only this session. So I think that it's fair that the webinar should get back to the participants with some information on actual practical work done with sargassum in the region as a mulch. I don't think it's conclusive, but it can shed some light on what they're looking for.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't see any questions in either the Q&A and the chat.
Maximi have the hands.
Right.
Maximi have the hands.
Right. Steve has his hand up, so.
But I want to make a comment to both Omairo and Paul. I know that Cash has been actively trying CARDI to reduce the cost of production of the hot pepper seed. And that will translate into reducing the cost of the seed on the regional market and probably expand market share for CARDI. With climate change and climate smart and the concept of climate smart compliance, do you see us reducing the cost of production? Because we're talking about the sustainability of the land we work on, the environment, and all these factors that we're going to bring on carbon sequestration. And I sent a document to Steve Maximi sometime over the last weekend, and I see compliance means additional technologies and additional costs for adopting the technologies, and probably more labor intensive in small farm situations. So I just want you to get, let's have a brief from you, both of you, as to how you see this being involved in CARDI seed production program, which is our main hot pepper activity.
Okay. Sorry, okay, I could begin. I believe the costs would be increased because of the improved technology and the uptake of techniques. Once there's a shift from what is conventionally done and typically done, there's always the need to educate the persons and also show and demonstrate the advantages of such. So you really want to have a good model as to the advantages and the output, which is improved. And to do so, you have to be, again, very consistent. You have to manage the process well. You got to make sure everyone is on board with the system that's being encouraged. So I definitely believe there will be an increased attach or associated with the, of course, you can see the benefits in the end, but at the same time, initially, especially, there will be a cost attached to it.
Am I wrong?
I totally agree with Paul. Last year was a good example for us. We had to put plants on the field, plants in containers, just to make sure a hurricane don't destroy the whole. So the whole stress was to get seeds, no matter what. So therefore, climate really have affected us. And also compliance. You have all these international institutions establishing policies and certifications that you need to comply. And therefore, you cannot just adjust or adopt practices if they're not accepted for seed production internationally. Therefore, I don't see the system coming, reducing the cost. I focus more on trying to make it more efficient internally, because I believe we could make it more efficient. We're working into that, having standards, having procedures that it will make the process efficient. And if we could increase, as we saw some experiments was done by FIA some years ago, density increase, that kind of situation, yes, we could try to increase productivity and see how that will affect. But management-wise, I don't say the cost will be reduced.
Thank you, Mario. Going back to the question and answer chart, are the presenters going to continue on this topic tomorrow? I think they have more things to share and getting quite interested. Okay, I'll answer that because we're running out of time. We're not going to continue this topic tomorrow. However, if you have pertinent questions to ask, you can send it to the coordinator of the webinar and it will be answered. Or you can contact my colleagues in Belize and Antigua directly. The last question or last comment, whatever modern technology we use due to climate change, we must always stress the importance of feeding the soil to give the yields we are looking for. Composting to keep the soil alive. So this is what somewhat along what we are just about discussing. Compost is an important part of climate smart agriculture for carbon sequestration, soil microbial status, improve it, and a whole number of things. The organic nature of the soil organic matter. So our production systems do not involve composting. So we may have to develop some huge compost heaps and use it as part of our soil amelioration, probably during land preparation, and that is before you put on the mulch.
Yeah.
All right. That's a very easy suggestion to adopt. Of course, that's going to involve additional costs.
Remember, we're talking for the whole region, so we cannot give specifics, but that is something that each area needs to determine. What are their requirements? They have not one fits all, and that is important. That is a climate smart decision as well. Avoid one decision fits all. That is why we were general enough, but you could actually try to adjust what is the need in my area.
So can I get some closing remarks from you, Paul?
Sure, yeah. As we just discussed, the entire process is very extensive. It requires a high level of commitment because from seed to the seed, and you manage the entire physiological development of the crop is very labor intensive. And it's something that you have to continue to monitor and to refine in terms of your management. As you recognize the changes with the climate will continue, and actually most of the outlets suggest that we are in this for the long run. The frequency of the droughts, the frequency of the dramatic weather events, and we have to be mindful of these things and in many cases adjust to suit. So from my standpoint, I believe there's a lot that we could continue to learn and a lot that we could do to improve the process. And it's all about being able to adapt to the climate change and the eventualities of this climate change. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity and sharing, and we look forward to continuing these discussions.
Well, Myra, brief closing comments, very brief.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I agree with Paul. This is a process that we have been learning. When you are responsible to know that seed quality is paramount for any farmer in the region, and then they invested on it, you really have to pay attention. And that is our aim. Our aim is to get a quality seed, at least with hot peppers. In general, the process requires a lot of money. It's not a cheap crop. However, it's a crop that is very gentle and it gives a lot back to whoever producing it. I think we need to appreciate that hot peppers is a land race, and we could have better programs. Right now, a lot of people just exploiting the programs, and they not understanding that by doing that, they reducing the possibility of this crop in the long term. So I see hot peppers as a cash crop that really can make a difference to the region. I think it has proven itself. We are known for hot peppers all over the world, but we need just as other crops, we need to treat well on the fields. Otherwise, we also will lose this one. And when it comes to greenhouse and other practices, whatever practice you use, it needs to be cost effective, but it also needs to be climate smart for the future generation to be able. If the future generation cannot get advantage of it, well, then your practices are not adequate.
Thank you very much, Paul and Maria, for a very good presentation. I think the level of interest the participants are suggesting that we continue tomorrow, but that's not possible. So expect some more questions from the participants through the coordinator or directly. We bring this session to a close. And tomorrow, let me remind the participants, we have sessions of integrated pest management. And that session, I can assure you, is going to be very interesting. We have two very, very good presenters.
Oh,
which is
sorry,
Dr.
Dr.
Harris and Dr. Dwight Robinson. So see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you very much.
Before we go, Paul, could you remember to drop the contact number for Antigua? Miss Lewis is asking for it. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll give her a sure.
Okay, well, colleagues, thanks again and see you tomorrow.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. Take care. All the very best.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe, huh? Stay safe.
Okay, the same for you.
COVID is alive and well.